If a mutation is favorable in a given environment, the mutated individual has a greater chance of surviving and passing that mutation on. When this happens enough, what once was a mutation may become normal, and thus the population, perhaps the entire species, could be said to have evolved. A change in environment cannot always be predicted, however, so it's almost impossible to say which mutations will become favorable. For instance, we may think it is a bad thing to be a moron, though in the future, an environmental pressure which favors morons may arise, leaving only morons on the planet. Maybe that's already happened, who knows? This same logic can be applied to clone eugenics in Star Wars. This, of course, is in the forefront of many of our minds due to the appearance of the Bad Batch in the first 4 episodes of Season 7 of Star Wars The Clone Wars. And in this video, we're going to explore the clone mutations or defects in detail, discussing why defects existed and analyzing some defected clones.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
While Jango Fett was the genetic template for clones grown into Poker City on Kamino, he was by no means a perfect template, and the Kaminoans modified his clones from the very start, tampering with their genes to ensure favorable behavioral traits such as loyalty, discipline, and aggression, and they even made physical alterations, granting clones greater stamina and dexterity, removing astigmatism, which is basically blurry vision, and removing allergies. Why is this all relevant to this video? Well, it proves the Kaminoans sought to improve their product, emulating the natural process of evolution in the clone population. But the Kaminoans also took it a step further, playing a sort of patient yet no less indifferent god. If they found a clone with a less than desirable mutation, they did not always dispose of them. Indeed, their responses varied quite a bit, as clone mutations varied quite a bit. Some minor mutations, such as eye color, which was quite prone to variation, and subtle differences in facial features were mostly ignored, while other mutations were worthy of genetic therapy. This, we can assume, would have occurred in the early stages of a clone's development. Of course, clones were terminated too, and it wasn't unheard of for fully developed clones to go missing. The Jedi, however, valued all forms of life, and as far as they knew, halted the termination of the defected clones, having them instead fill support roles, such as in the case of Clone 99, who we'll cover toward the end of this video. At this point, it should be clear to you that the cloning process was imperfect and that Kaminoans liked to experiment a little and did not instantly terminate every clone which deviated from their modified Fett template. The Bad Batch, or Clone Force 99, was a great example of such an experiment. While it's unclear if the mutations of the original 4 members of the Bad Batch, Crosshair, Hunter, Tech, and Wrecker, were a result of an imperfection in the cloning process, or if they were by Kaminoan design, it proves once again that the Kaminoans liked to experiment a little with what they believed could be desirable mutations. When we say desirable mutations, the Bad Batch's mutations certainly are just that, but only in the environment of the Clone Wars, and more specifically in guerrilla operations in the Clone Wars. The Bad Batch would have been ill-suited to regular military life, just as regular clones would have been ill-suited to civilian life. Well, most of them. While Crosshair, with his exceptional vision, Hunter with his enhanced and extra senses, Tech with his freakish aptitude for science and skills with technology, and Wrecker with his immense size and strength had distinct mutations and obvious aesthetic differences, some desirable mutations weren't quite as pronounced. Clone Trooper Pilot Axe, for instance, could be considered a defective clone, though in reality, he was just a very tall boy, standing at a height of 2 meters and 8 centimeters as opposed to the average clone height of 1 meter 83 centimeters, which is 6 foot. So the Bad Batch's mutations were desirable in combat, but what about some clone mutations which were undesirable in combat? We'll be discussing Clone 99 in this section, yes, but first let's discuss some of the less obvious examples, the deserters and the traitors. There is certainly an argument that clone troopers who deserted the Grand Army of the Republic had some form of behavioral defection, relating specifically to their genetically programmed loyalty, and there's no better example than Cut Lawquane. LeQuain was a clone trooper, but when his transport was shot down, he fled the wreckage, deserting the survivors and ultimately finding a Twi'lek to make a hybrid alien baby with. What inspired LeQuain to do so, if not some genetic mutation? He later had an encounter with Rex, who ended up empathizing with his situation on some level, and this particular action was a pivotal moment in Rex's character arc as well, and we'll get into that soon. Much the same as the case of clone deserters, it's fair to say that clone traitors were also inspired by genetic mutation, a defect, and if the Kaminoans tampered with the genetic template of Fett to make his clones more loyal, this only makes more sense. You're probably thinking about Slick's treachery, and you're right too. To sum it up, Slick understood that he and the rest of the clones were little more than slaves of the Jedi, so he betrayed the Republic by feeding inside information to the CIS, which allowed them to ambush Republic forces on Christosis. These were not actions of a normal, non-defective clone. Also, while this clone wasn't in Star Wars The Clone Wars, it's worth mentioning the mad clone Kekelius, a behaviorally deformed clone trooper who went utterly mad on a recon mission and killed his entire squad, only to be found chilling by the bodies, firm on the belief they were droids in disguise. Now, Clone 99 is the most blatant example of a clone with an undesirable mutation as we got to see in Star Wars The Clone Wars, and it's very likely his survival was an initiative of the Jedi rather than the Kaminoans, who likely would have terminated him because he simply couldn't be useful in combat. A failed product. But again, 99's undesirable mutation, his hunched back and swiftly aged body, were simply undesirable in that environment. It's possible, like the morons in our planet's grim but thankfully hypothetical future, that 99's mutation could have been desirable in a different environment.
Even this bad batcher 99 has more sense than you guys do, and he's a maintenance clone.
You don't give him enough credit.
You're all a waste of my time. We should treat them as failures. Besides, I've already requested that they be moved to cleanup and maintenance.
I'll get more!
99, you can't!
I'm a soldier, like you!
This is what I was bred for.
This last one is interesting because it was a desirable mutation which ultimately backfired. The clone we're talking about is Captain Rex, and his desirable mutation was a tendency toward independent thought. The Kaminoans fostered independent thought, yes, putting clones with such tendency through advanced training programs, and the trait was useful in combat, especially in a leadership role. But ultimately, this trait caused Rex to tear out his inhibitor chip and abandon his orders, notably Order 66. Again, if loyalty was programmed into Rex by his Kaminoan creators, why would Rex betray his orders if it wasn't for some stubborn behavioral mutation? So, to conclude, whether or not a mutation is desirable or undesirable depends on the environment and the pressures of the environment. Clones in the Clone Wars did not evolve naturally, so their Kaminoan creators played God, manipulating the genetic template and fostering behavior to suit the needs of the Republic. They also weren't shy to cull the herd, so to speak. That is, until the Jedi slapped their wrist, and they certainly weren't shy to put promising mutations to the test. If any of the clones in the Bad Batch, for instance, could have fit into the standard military, it's likely the Kaminoans would have altered their genetic template to manifest their desirable mutations. Really then, why couldn't they have taken the best of the Bad Batch and applied it to the best of the standard clones? In general guys, what did you think of our video on clone mutations or defects? Can you think of any other clone defects which appeared anywhere in the EU? What do you think inspired Cut LeQuain's desertion, Slick's treachery, and Rex's independent thought? Was it solely a genetic mutation, or was it something they learned? Let us know in the comments section below. And just before you go guys, make sure you check out the links in the description below if you want to chat with other Star Wars fans on our main Discord, play games with other Star Wars fans on our Geetsly's gaming network, and help support us on our Patreon. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.